Started and let people filter in as they do, but thank you for all being here today. My name is Natalie Orsley and I am an assistant director here at U Chicago with the Alumni Career and Development team. You are joining us today during our Young Professional series, which is aimed at supporting recent alumni looking to make career changes, or just those of you that are lifelong learners when it comes to your careers in your life. That is one of the things the webinar is about today. Welcome to How to Find a Job That Matters, where we will tackle the topic of finding a job that is more than just a source of income, but rather a source of engagement and purpose in your life. We are led today by Gail Golden. Gail is a graduate of the college, an author, a psychologist, and an entrepreneur who has worked extensively with senior leaders in Fortune 1000 executives to enhance not just their business, but their personal growth and to help improve outcomes for their clients. She is the brain and the personality behind Gail Golden Consulting. And she's a phenomenal speaker, has taught classes at Booth here at U Chicago, and is the author of Curating Your Life, and is going to cover a lot of those topics today. We're really excited to have Gail lead us today. Before I hand it over to her, we will be taking moments throughout the presentation to answer questions or talk about this sort of things that Gail is going to cover. So please submit any questions or comments you have to us as they come up, because we will take time throughout the presentation to address them using the Q&A function or the chat. We're going to try to answer as many as possible as the conversation goes. With all that said, Gail, I am ready to hand it over to you to get us started.
Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. I'm just going to quick share my screen so we can get started. Now, I did this before and it worked just fine. Here we go, share. There we go. And I want to do to slideshow. There we go. Okay, everybody can see my screen now, is that correct? Wonderful. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about how I came to be interested in this topic, and then we'll dig down into the what and the how. So my background very quickly is, first half of my career, I was a clinical psychologist doing psychotherapy with a wide variety of clients. Mid-career, for a number of reasons, I decided it was time for me to make a change. Basically, I was just kind of stale with what I was doing and ready for some new challenges. So I went back to school, got an MBA, and have been working since 2003 as a leadership consultant and an executive coach. And that's been a fascinating new chapter in my career. Here's the thing, the populations that I worked with, those two groups, were very different in many ways. My clinical clients were people struggling with depression and anxiety and marital breakups, people with often very real and complex challenges that they were facing. Meanwhile, my business executive clients tended to be, on the whole, healthier, wealthier. They had better resources. They were a different group of people. But the fascinating thing was that there was one problem that ran across both groups of people, much to my surprise. And that problem was feeling overwhelmed, inadequate, and exhausted a lot of the time. Whether you were a stay-at-home mom with 3 little kids or the CEO of a global company, sooner or later, I'd start to hear those kinds of things from you. And I thought, gee, like this is a problem that nearly everybody has. We've been talking about work-life balance for a very long time, but it doesn't seem to be working. Nobody has a balanced life, and people are struggling. So I came up with a different model for how to think about leading a life that doesn't lead you to be exhausted and overwhelmed and feeling inadequate, but is a life where you feel energized and engaged and like you're doing things that are important. And the model that I came up with was curating your life. The idea is, if you think about a museum exhibit, curator has to sort of answer 3 questions, four questions. First of all, what is this exhibit about? What am I trying to design here? What's the message? What's the focus? What is it about? And once I've figured out what the exhibit is about, then as the curator, I got to make 3 choices. What doesn't go in the exhibit because it just doesn't fit, Might be great art, but this is an exhibit about Michelangelo, and that's Chagall, so it doesn't belong in the exhibit. What goes in the exhibit, but it's not the main thing, it's not the big piece that everybody's going to come to see. It goes off in a side room somewhere. And then what are the 1 or 2 or 3 key pieces that are the focus of the exhibit? And I thought, what do we think about our lives the same way? First of all, I got to figure out what my life's exhibit is about. And then I have to organize my energy so that the things that really don't belong in my life right now, they are nothing to do with what my exhibit is about. I eliminate those things. Then there's a group of activities which they have to be in my exhibit. They're required. They're part of what's necessary, but they're not the main thing. The things that go in the side room, those are things, quite honestly, that I have to learn to accept good enough. Not to give my best energy to those things, just accept good enough. In fact, when I really want to irritate people, I say, those are the things I'm going to be mediocre at. And I'm going to be okay with that. I'm not going to waste time feeling guilty or inadequate. That's my choice. If you do those things, you eliminate the things that really don't matter, and you let yourself be just good enough on the things that are necessary but not the main thing. You will have the energy for your greatness, for the things that really matter, for what your life is about. So I developed that model. I wrote a book about it called Curating Your Life. And what we're going to be talking about today really comes from thinking that I did in creating that book. Now, I would comment that, first of all, we're going to focus on the first piece. How do I figure out what my exhibit is about? What really matters to me at this time in my life? I want to point out, we're fortunate to be able to ask that question. There are a lot of people who they have to do whatever it takes to get food on the table, to feed their kids, to pay their doctor bills, whatever the case may be. And frankly, for them, looking for meaning and purpose and full engagement in their work, that's a luxury they can't afford. So I'm very grateful to be one of those people who has the opportunity to think about this question. I would also suggest, as we go through the conversation today, that there are 2 fundamental pieces to this puzzle. The first one is knowing myself. Who am I? What matters to me? What am I passionate about? Which, by the way, changes over your lifespan, so it's something you have to reevaluate from time to time. And then, where are the places which will give me the opportunity to be that person, to make that exhibit, to live those values and to live those priorities? And that can be both, what is the specific job that I'm looking for? What is the industry I want to work in? What company do I want to work for? Because the full expression of those values and those priorities won't depend just on me. They'll also depend on the context in which I find myself. So those are the 2 kind of basic building blocks, I think, of this puzzle. So, what really matters to me? What are my values? You know, on some level, you sort of think, well, gee, I mean, that should be pretty obvious. You ought to be able to express what your values are, what matters to you. But in fact, plenty of the people I talk to, again, both my clinical patients in the old days and my business leader executives that I'm working with now, often have some difficulty articulating what their values or their priorities are. So I've done some thinking about ways in which you might help to clarify. And I think especially when you're younger, especially perhaps when you're making a transition out of school into the workforce for the first time, that's a time I find when a lot of people feel a sense of uncertainty about this particular piece of who am I, what matters to me. So clearly one of the things that you can do is to ask people who know you, you know, what do you think are my values? What do I express to you as you look at the way I live my life? What do you see? Which frankly, can be quite revealing and sometimes surprising, because there are times when you may think you're living a life that expresses a value that people are the most important thing to you. And your friends may say to you, actually, it seems to me like partying is the most important thing to you. So, there's some real value, I think, in asking the people around you how they see you. Another trick is to look at how you spend your money. What are you putting your money into? And how does that express what's important to you? And one of the ways is to look at when you donate to organizations, what kinds of organizations do you donate to? For example, I look at my philanthropic contributions, and they tend to be for educational institutions, including, by the way, the University of Chicago, medical institutions, arts institutions, and then sort of, feeding the hungry, those kinds of helping those who are in severe poverty. There are lots of organizations that I don't donate money to. For example, I'm not a huge donator to environmental organizations or animal care organizations. It's not that I don't think those are important, but they're not the most important thing to me. So other people can support those organizations, and I'll put my money into symphony orchestras and operas and things like that. So looking at where you both spend your money and donate your money gives you a sense of your values. And then the third one is looking at how you spend your time. But there's a trick to this one, because if you are already spending your time in ways that are consistent with your values, you're in good shape. It's when you realize that you're spending a lot of your time on things that don't feel important or significant or meaningful that you get into this place of discomfort. So, as I said, if you look at how you spend your time and you think, yeah, I'm spending most of my time on the things that really matter to me, great. You're in a good position then to figure out how to keep doing that and how to expand it. So I'm going to stop here for a minute, check in with you, Natalie. Any comments, questions, things that you or anybody else would like to add?
Yeah, I think we had one question that is a great one to address right here at the beginning, which is, how do you know if what you're going through is a season or a trend? So how do you know if, right now I'm really burnt out from the work or my personal life, and it's kind of happening in the right now, maybe there are changes I can adjust to make those feelings lighter, but still continue my life as it is? Or how do you know, this seems to be, it's just a trend that's continuing. I need to make a big change. I need to sort of address my values or address my work in a larger capacity and make a change that can fix the way I'm feeling.
I think that is a really great question, and it doesn't have a simple answer, but it's really important. I think a couple of things. First of all, one of my philosophies in general is when I'm not sure, pause, wait, don't make a decision immediately, and see, do I feel the same way a week from now, a month from now? Maybe think backwards to how long have I been feeling this way, so that is one of the, if the feeling passes, if I start to feel more congruent with who I am and where I am, then, as you say, it was a season. But I will tell you, the big shift in my life was when I left clinical psychology, which I thought I was going to do for my whole life. I thought I was going to die in my therapist's chair. And that came to me when I was sitting with a client one day, and the new client was talking to me about what he had come to see me for. And I heard the voice in my head saying, I know you. I know what you're going to say. I know what I'm going to say. I know how long this is going to take. I know how it's going to turn out. And that was a very big deal to me. That was like a big warning sign. I thought, golly, my client deserves a therapist who's more engaged than that. And furthermore, I deserve to have work that is engaging me more than that. And it made me start to think, maybe I shouldn't be a therapist 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. It's time to look, goodness knows for what. I had no idea what I was going to do next, but I had a feeling it wasn't going to continue to be this. So I think sometimes it's wait and see, and sometimes it really clunks you on the head. Ah, I thought this was it, and it's not, and I've got to start looking around. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it does. I think that covers, I think there's this sort of fear in you when you have these feelings that I need to make a change now, but being able to say, let me wait and see kind of what the underlying causes of it is. Am I just really stressed out right now and I need to take a break and reassess where I'm spending my time and energy, or is it a longer issue that I really need to make a large change and make sure that the work I'm doing is benefiting me more than it's taking away?
I think that's right. I think the other thing, your word seasons also made me think of, there are predictable seasons in our lives. You know, when you have your first child, everything changes. When your youngest child leaves home, when a marriage happens or breaks up, all kinds of things shift. You know, significant birthdays for many of us are times when we reevaluate. Whoa, you know, who am I? How much more time do I have? Am I doing what I want to be doing with my time? So there are lifespan changes that play into this as well. Okay, so this then is about values clarification. A little bit more on that. Some other questions to ask about values clarification. Your legacy. You know, what do you want to be remembered for? And if you're an older person, this may be, what do I want to be remembered for after I die? If you're younger, it may be, you know, when I'm not working in this job any longer, what do I want people to remember me for? What kind of contribution would I want to have made to this project, this organization? Think about the people you really admire. Who are the people that you find inspiring? And those may be people who are in your personal life. They may be, Nelson Mandela. I mean, people that embody things that you think are really important. Now, if you Google values self-assessment, all kinds of tools will come up. And I have to stop and say, you know, as a psychologist who was trained in test construction, I'm pretty sure that those tools are not properly validated and not properly, you know, sample sized and all of the good statistical things that we ought to do when we create assessments. But having said that, they are, I think, useful thought starters, if you will. So there are a couple of them that I've put on this slide, tools that I tried myself. And you fill out you answer some questions, and then they send you back, you know, here are the key values that you expressed. And I think, again, not that that's going to give you solid gold answers, but they're good thought starters and can be a way of adding to this process. And then I would say to you, it's really easy to make a values list that has like 27 values on it. That's not terribly useful. That doesn't really help you to figure out what your exhibit is about. Whether I'm working, you know, I work with companies sometimes to help them create their company values. And again, they first of all like to have 17 different values. And secondly, they like to do these pablum, you know, we believe in honesty. Right, most companies do. So finding what is unique to the company or to you and paring it down. I would say if you can pick your top 5, that's probably the maximum. And if you can narrow it down to 3, do it. So for example, one of the clients that I worked with, she went through this exercise and she came up for herself with the 4 key values for her. The first one was beauty. It was important to her that people, things, environments, even moods be beautiful, and that she wanted that to be part of what her exhibit was about. The second one was success, as she defined it, being impactful, earning good money, being well respected, all of that goes along with success. The third one was holiness. She was religious, and for her it was about living in a way that felt to her consistent with her religious tradition and with what God expected of her. And the fourth one was joy. Living with joy, experiencing joy to the fullest extent. Now, I think those are great values. Beauty, success, holiness, and joy. They are particular to her. Not everybody is going to have those same ones. But the exercise and coming up with those then helped her to think about, okay, these things I'm considering doing or this job I'm considering taking, is it going to bring me beauty, success, holiness, and joy? And if not, I probably don't want to be taking that job. Okay. Natalie, before we move on, anything else from your side?
No, I don't think so. I think we're hitting all the points.
Okay, good. So then the next thing I think, in terms of finding the job that's really going to feel meaningful and impactful, is figuring out what energizes you. And that's important because sometimes you may have values, but serving those values, it exhausts you or drains you. So you may want to do that as a sideline. I mean, let's say, for example, this example just popped into my head. I put high value on being good to elderly people. But if I tried to do that 40 hours a week, that's not how I'm wired. I'm very happy to go and have a meal with an elderly person or correspond with an elderly person, but I'm not somebody who's going to work in a senior center 5, 6, 7 days a week. Other people are, thank goodness, but that's not me. So figuring out what energizes me is another piece of this puzzle. And here are some of the questions that you can ask yourself. When I'm wrapping up my workday and I'm feeling good, what happened that day that made me feel so great? What was it that made me think I love my job? What was the best job I ever had? And why? Why did I like it so much? What was the worst job I ever had and what was so awful about it? And what job maybe that I never had, but it sounds really interesting, fun, worthwhile to me. So I'll use myself as exhibit A here. This happened to me one day. I was riding home on the bus and I was feeling great about my job. And I thought, what makes me feel this way? And I was able to figure out very quickly it was 3 things. One was if I felt I had done work that really made a difference to somebody that day. The second one was I'd learned something new and it was exciting me and I was looking forward to learning more about that. And the third one was I landed a great big new piece of business. Those were my big 3. So then if I'm going to be energized by a job, it better have one or more of those things in it, or I'm not going to feel energized. What was the best job I ever had? The one I have. I love what I'm doing. I'm working for myself. I've got all kinds of variety. One day is always different from the next. There are lots of things about it I don't like, but this is by far the best job I've ever had. What was the worst job I ever had? Easy. I had a job working in a library where nobody ever did any work. Everybody sat around, read the newspaper, chatted. The library was a giant mess because nobody ever put any books away. And in a very short space of time, I started acting the same way everybody else did. And it was boring and embarrassing. It was a horrible job. What job sounds really interesting, fun, worthwhile to me? One that's really different from anything I've ever done is teaching English as a second language. I think that would be really fascinating and fun. So if I look at all those things, what am I loving about my current job? What's my best job? What's my worst job? And what sounds really interesting to me and why? Those pieces start to come together with some patterns in terms of what's going to work for Gail Golden. And I would suggest to you that if you do that same series for yourself, it will give you a pretty good idea of what's going to sap your energy and make you feel lousy, or what's going to really enable you to keep putting out your best day after day in a way that feels great. Okay, stop for a pause. Natalie, you got any comments or things that people want to add?
Yeah, I think we had one question about sort of walking that line of a job that kind of drained all your energy before in a negative way, but now starting a job that you're really passionate and it energizes you, but it's taking a lot out of you because you love it so much and it lines up so well with what you're passionate about and what you value. So how do you walk that line about not throwing yourself kind of headfirst into a different sort of exhaustion just because you're following your passions and your values?
Well, that's another great question. First of all, I would say the exhaustion that comes from working at something that you really dislike is a very different kind of exhaustion than one comes from, oh my goodness, I'm so passionate, I just want to do this all the time. But they're both exhaustion. But there's a very different vibe there. The second thing I would say is, I think new jobs are always exhausting. I think starting a new job, certainly starting a new job in a new company, is always exhausting. I mean, you walk in there, on the one hand, there's that honeymoon where they love you and you love them, but you don't even know where the bathroom is. You've got to figure it all out. And you have no political capital that allows you to influence or offer ideas. I mean, what you need to do for the first few months on a new job is keep your mouth shut and listen and learn, especially if you're in a leadership role. So the first few months on a new job, by definition, are exhausting. But I also think there's another piece to that question, and it goes back to one of my other key principles. Years ago, I read a book, and I will highly recommend it to all of you, and I don't have the name written on the slide, so take out your pencil and write it down. It's called The Power of Full Engagement. The Power of Full Engagement. It was written by two guys who were athletic coaches who specialized in working with world-class athletes who had fallen off their game. They were not able to perform at the level that they had been previously able. And it wasn't that they'd suffered an injury or something. They just weren't being able to perform. And so they started working with these athletes to figure out what was going on and how could they help them get back to peak performance. And what they learned out of that, they then started to apply to what they called corporate athletes, people who are in high visibility, high stress positions in the business world. And they have all kinds of good ideas in their book. But the key idea that changed how I live, and I've taught it to every one of my clients, is that there is a pattern of managing your energy which leads to peak productivity. And that pattern is what they call sprint and recover. So it's not thinking about your life and your work as a marathon. It is not boasting about the fact that you work 24/7. If you're working 24/7, you're being really stupid because you're going to be less productive. What it is being able to work in a passionate, engaged, full bore sprint for a defined period of time, and then you stop and rest. And I find that in American business culture, we're good at the sprint part, and we reward the sprint part, and we are terrible at the recover part. But the most highly effective people have learned how to do that. And they take their breaks, and they take their recovery time. And that's everything from the 15-minute mini break mid-morning and mid-afternoon, where you dial down, you disconnect, and you recharge your batteries. You get up from your screen, you walk around, you drink some water, you look out the window, whatever, to the chunk of time in every week that you turn off all the screens and you disconnect for a little while, to a vacation that you take once or more a year. Americans are terrible at taking our vacation time. Take your vacation time. So all of that sprint and recover is really, really important. And going back to the question about, I'm in a new job, I love it, I'm excited, how do I take your recovery time? Build it in. Sprint as hard as you like, and then be sure that you have that recovery time. It really changes your ability to keep at it and to stay productive over the long term instead of burning yourself out physically or emotionally or mentally. Okay, anything else?
Yeah, I think there's one more question that is really helpful here as we focus on a lens of sort of our young professionals, or maybe our professionals who have been in sort of the same job or same routine for a long time. How do you answer these two middle questions about the best job and the worst job you ever had if you've not had a lot of job experience and you're not really sure how to pick one or the other?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I'm thinking about maybe extracurricular activities that you tried and the ones you loved and the ones you hated. I was a Girl Scout for about 3 minutes. I mean, Girl Scouting was not for me. But, being in the theater, being in plays was wonderful. Okay, great. What was it about the Girl Scouting that I didn't like? And what was it about being on stage that I loved so much? So I think you can apply it to hobbies, to other activities, to extracurriculars, even courses that you took, maybe. The course that you loved versus the course that you hated. Was it because the professor was so great or because the content was so great? What was it or the other students were so stimulating? Gives you some idea about where you get your energy from.
That's awesome. And I think it's also helpful, just from my perspective too, to look at maybe if you've only had the one job in your life, but there have been different aspects of that job as well. So maybe you really liked one project, but hated another one. Kind of see what works
Right.
best. Did you like a project that was super, people oriented, working with teammates, kind of higher thinking of the work that you do, and you hated sort of the minutia data entry, sort of really boring alone tasks, and that can help inform sort of what you're looking at in the future as well.
Right. Good. Excellent. Okay. So then moving on. Come on. Up. Dr. Blattner is a respected colleague of mine, and he years ago taught me these 3 questions by which you can evaluate whether you are in the right job for you. The first one is, am I doing good work? As defined by me. Do I feel that I am doing good work? And of course, that good work also has the meaning both of work that is good quality, but also work that does good, that makes a difference. And again, that's very personal. What good work may seem to be for me might be quite different for somebody else. My husband is a professional violist. So for him, doing good work is playing a piece of music perfectly. For me, doing good work is interacting with a client in a way that enables him or her to go out and do their job better. Very different. Am I having fun? And am I making money? If you have all 3 of those, chances are you are in the right job for you. If you've got 2 of them, you're probably doing okay, and maybe you can figure out how to fix the one that you don't have. If you have 1 or none, wrong job. Figure it out. Find something else. As long as you are one of those fortunate people who has the option to do that. Not everybody does. So we are lucky. All right. So now I've got a sense of what my priorities are. How do I figure out what kind of work is going to fit with my priorities? I figured out what my values are. Now there's all those jobs out there. This is a tricky one. I think it requires some real thinking, exploration, sometimes doing experiments and trying out different things to see. One of the things that I think is a good suggestion is that on your resume, you could provide hints about what your values are. Now, I don't mean that you put all your political opinions onto your resume or something like that. I wouldn't advise that at all. But including things that you have done that really represent your values is a way to enable the recruiter to say, oh yeah, Gail's going to be really a good fit for this. Or no, if that's what's important to her, she's not going to like working in this job. It's not a good fit for what matters to her. So I think that's an interesting and thought-provoking suggestion. I think it helps if you can identify for yourself what are the must-haves in your job. And that can be everything like I got to make at least 50 cents an hour to, I have to work with other people. I don't want to work by myself all the time. It might be I have to have opportunities to learn new things, whatever. What are the must-haves that if you don't have that, you are not going to be happy in this job? And again, try not to have 27 things on that list. If you can figure out maybe half a dozen that are really critical, it could be the location of the work. It could be, I want to work outdoors, whatever. What are the things that are the must-haves for you? I think one of the great ideas is informational interviewing, which is when you find people who are doing work that you think might be interesting to you. Not that you're applying for a job, but you take them out for coffee and ask them to talk with you about what their work is, what they do, what do they like about it, what don't they like about it. I find other people's children, often the parents come to me and say, would you talk? My son is thinking about becoming a psychologist. Would you talk with him? And you know what? Other people helped my kids. So I'm absolutely willing to help other people's kids. So finding people who are in the lines of work that you think might fit with your priorities. And again, you need to make it mutual. Buy them a cup of coffee. Do something for them. Don't just suck their brains out. And at the very least, write them a thank you note afterwards so that it's a mutual exchange. But many, many people are happy to talk to young people, and especially, when we're alumni of the same institution and things like that. So finding those connections. Be open and curious. Don't limit yourself too narrowly right off the bat. I want to be a cardiac surgeon in a top clinic in Arizona. I mean, just, being more open, I think, will enable you to consider more possibilities. And then, as I say, as you begin to get a feeling for what type of work turns you on, energizes you, and fits with your priorities, then you can start thinking about where are the industries that I can do that type of work, and where is the company that is going to enable me to do that. So, how then can I tell if a particular workplace is going to be right for me? Do I want to apply to that company? Do I want to, if they give me a job offer, do I want to work there? My very first job as a psychologist was in a rural, very old-fashioned psychiatric hospital. I was so thrilled to get a job as a psychologist, and it was in a location that I needed to be for my husband's work, so it was there. And several people told me, Gail, it's an awful place to work. And I thought, I'm not like everybody else. I'm resilient. I know how to find joy wherever. I love being a psychologist. This is going to be great. Guess what? It was an awful place to work. Just miserable. I could spend the rest of the time that we have left, the remaining 15 minutes, telling you about what a horrible job that was. Almost as horrible as the library where nobody ever did anything. There were things I learned there. I don't regret that I did the job, but I got out of there as fast as I could and never looked back. I should have listened to all those people who told me that it was awful and not assumed that, oh, well, just because it's awful for you. Generally speaking, if something is awful to a lot of other people who are sort of like me, chances are it's going to be awful for me as well. So that was I did that twice in my career, actually. I twice took jobs that people told me were going to be horrible, and in both cases they were. So should have paid more attention. So how can you tell if the workplace is right for you? The first thing is don't trust the company website. I mean, I'm not going to write a website. If you look on the Gail Golden Consulting website, you're not going to see all the reasons why it's a horrible place to work. I'm going to make it seem like, as a client, you want to hire me, and as a colleague, you might want to come and work with me. it's a sales document, right? So, and frankly, right now, in the current climate, every single company website is telling you how important diversity, DEI is to them, and ESG and all of these important things, and how great they are, and how socially responsible they are. You can write that document in 5 minutes. It doesn't mean you're really doing it. So I think, yes, you can look at the company website to find out what they do and who works there. But in terms of what does it feel like to work there, I don't think that's going to give you the information you're looking for. The best thing you can do is talk to people who work there, and find out people who have worked there, are working there, and talk to them about what their experience is. Now, of course, different strokes for different folks. Not everybody's turned on by the same thing. But again, if you get most people telling you, for goodness sake, don't come here, it's awful, that's a fairly good indication that maybe you shouldn't go there. If you can, spend time on site. Now, I know on site for many companies is it's the virtual world. But for those companies that actually have buildings that people are working in, going in there and getting a feeling for what the vibe is like, what the atmosphere is like, can be very telling in terms of what the experience is going to be there. And then, of course, there are a number of online tools that you can look at. And again, I'm not an expert on online search. These were some of the first ones that popped up. You're probably familiar with all of them. And by the way, if anybody who's participating has other online websites that you have found to be helpful in this regard, put them in the chat, because I know they would be appreciated by other participants in the webinar today. Natalie, any comments, questions, thoughts that people are shooting in?
Yeah, I think a big one that I think that's super interesting to me is, is it possible for you to find a job that matters, but it not be your full-time role? So maybe you love the work that you're doing already, or it's meeting some of the goals with your finances, stability, but it's not personally rewarding and you want to maybe add something to the plate. Is it possible for you to add something on, maybe a part-time thing or something like that, to make you reach those values without having to leave behind sort of the stability you already have?
The answer is yes. I think there are two things. One is, sometimes within your job, you can go to your manager and say, look, I would really like to do a project on X. Is there any room for that in my role? Or is there a role? And if so, how could I get that role in order to do that? There is often flexibility within an organization to redesign your role. But the other thing is, I know a number of people for whom their job is how they make a living, and their passion is something else. Many people in the arts, their passion is their painting, their music, their work in the theater. And in that case, the value of the job, the thing that matters to you, is making enough money so that I can pursue my passion. I don't look for my passion to be fulfilled on the job. Now, hopefully I don't have to hate what I do. I mean, it's interesting. I know a young man who went out to Hollywood to become a screenwriter. And the years have gone by and he's still banging his head against that wall to get his script made into a movie. And for years he worked in restaurants to support himself until he hated it. He thought, if I have to wait on one more person, I'm just going to pour the soup on their head. So now he started to work in sound production, which gets him onto movie sets. He doesn't love it. It's not his passion, but he doesn't hate it. And it gives him the flexibility and the time to continue to pursue his screenwriting. So there are ways to put the pieces together like that. And I think your main job from which you earn your money does not necessarily have to be your passion. Having said that, I think for most of us, if we can put those pieces together, it's fantastic. If I can make money doing what I love, that's a pretty good scenario for most of us.
Amazing. And I think another question that kind of follows along that line is, What happens if you poured yourself into an education, a career, you spent time developing your skills in one area, and you've now kind of taken a step back, reassessed your values, and realized it's not the way you want to go, but you have all of this education, all of this experience in this one specific area, and making the leap to something very different may seem impossible or too much work for the benefit. How do you balance sort of chasing your values and your passions with also the reality of what you've built so far?
Again, great question, and it's not a simple problem, but I will say so many skills are transferable. So many of the things that you trained as a lawyer and then you discover that you really hate the law. Okay. But all that, the reasoning ability, the knowledge of the law, figuring out how to make systems work, being able to take the point of view of your client even when you don't personally agree with the client, and representing that client because that ability to step into somebody else's shoes, all those kinds of things are hugely transferable to other lines of work. So figuring out in your own head what you've got that is transferable instead of boxing yourself in, I think is really important. Then it's the challenge of selling that to whoever the recruiter is, right? Because some recruiters have very narrow ideas of, if you don't have this, this, and this, we are not even going to look at you. And yes, if you're going to be a brain surgeon, you better have an MD. I don't want you to operate on my brain if you don't have an MD. So there are certainly requirements that are important. But I'll tell you, to some extent, this happened to me, right? I got a PhD in clinical psychology, and I beat my brains out for years learning how to be a really good therapist. It's very hard work, and it takes a long time to get to be good at it. And then I began to realize, I don't want to do this anymore. Yikes, what now? So part of it was figuring out, what do I have that's transferable? And then in my case, there was retraining. When I decided I wanted to be a business psychologist, I recognized that I had no beans about business. And if I'm going to walk into some CEO's office and say, hello, I'm here to help you, and he can rightly say to me, well, what do you know of my world? And the answer is, not so much. I'm not very helpful to him. So I needed to spend 2 years really grounding myself in the language, in the priorities, in the ways in which business operates, so that I could marry that to what I knew about psychology. It was great fun. I had a wonderful time making that transition. So sometimes retraining is necessary. Sometimes it's about figuring out what your transferable skills are. And sometimes, again, maybe, to use my example of the law, maybe that, you're practicing corporate law, and what you want to practice is not-for-profit law or family law, or what, maybe there are other ways to tweak and use what you've got.
Amazing.
It can be pretty dismaying if you've worked hard to train for something and then you realize, oh shoot, this ain't it after all.
For sure. Yeah. That kind of the realizing that you spent a lot of time, but those skills are transferable. And I think if you know how to sell yourself and sell what you know, it works in a lot of fields. I think one final question before we continue on is,
right.
So talking to people who work there as an investigative tactic, how do you get people to be fully honest with you about their experience? People, we obviously don't want to badmouth our company sometimes, and especially in a time right now we're in with a lot of resignation and a lot of job openings in places. Sometimes they're just going to sell you the dream because they want you to come and take away some of the workload that's on them. So how do you get people to be transparent and honest about their experience so you can assess if it's actually a place you want to be?
That's a great question. I think one of the things I would do is to promise confidentiality. I want you to know I really appreciate that you're talking to me today, and I will never tell anybody else what you've told me. This is just between the two of us. So I think that might be part of it. I think you can also, you can watch the body language. You can sometimes get a sense of somebody's, giving you the spiel rather than speaking from the heart. You can also ask the tough questions. What's the worst thing about working there? And if they give you some sappy answer, oh, the worst thing is they care about us too much. Yeah, right. Okay, it's kind of like on the other side, on the job interview, when somebody says, what's the thing about you that troubles other people? Oh, I have such high standards. Yeah, okay. That's not a very honest answer in terms of what might be irritating about you. Offering confidentiality, asking, what do you like least about the job? What's the hardest thing about the job? How do you wish it would be different? Those are some of the questions that you might ask. And again, if you can talk to more than one person, then you can start listening for patterns and similarities.
Amazing.
Okay. So the last thing that I want to do is, by the way, is that silly little box in the corner of my screen showing up to you?
It is, yes.
Okay, I'm going to say, go away. All right. Next. This is the last thing that I'm going to talk about this morning, and then we'll do the wrap up. I recently came across a book. Marcus Buckingham, some of you may have heard of him. He's a well-known leadership development leader. He created the Strengths Finder test, which some of you may have heard of. And he's written a new book called Love and Work. And what Buckingham has found through his research is, if you want great work from yourself or from the people who work for you, it is not a matter of fitting people into roles. It is a matter of fitting roles to people, of finding out what are people passionate about, what do they love to do, what are they really good at doing, and then helping them to create that job. Now, when I first started to hear this, I thought, yeah, right. I mean, every manager is going to say, okay, Gail, what do you really want to do? Oh, okay, then you can do that. Well, meanwhile, the company has to run. I mean, certain tasks have to get done. So, how does this work in real life? And what I like about where Buckingham went with this is that he said the trick is figuring out what is your passion and then figuring out how you turn that into contribution. So it's not just, what do I love? Okay, how can I do that? But how can I make this a contribution? And I think that's really important. So as I'm looking at roles and companies and industries, it is about, okay, what am I passionate about? How will that bring value to this company, to this organization, to this industry? And if it isn't going to bring value, why should they pay me to do it? So that's, I think, the sort of where the rubber hits the road, if you will. Yes, I need to be clear about what my passion is, but then how is this going to be a contribution in this context for this company, on this team, at this time? And if I can marry those two together, then I have a chance to do really great work. And doing great work feels great. So that's, both makes you productive and happy, which are the two things that, frankly, I put very high value on in the workplace. So that's really it in terms of my content. Any further questions or comments that anybody has made, Natalie?
I don't think there's too much. I guess a kind of last question is, so you've developed all these ideas of what your values are. You've decided you're going to go out into the workforce and sell yourself on these values and jobs that really cater towards these. How do you convince employers that the value that you bring and the values that you bring are worthwhile them taking a chance on the fact that maybe you don't have the traditional background or experience they're coming from?
I suspect, there are some employers that you're never going to convince. If you don't have an MBA from an Ivy League school, which, by the way, doesn't include the University of Chicago, then we're not hiring you, Don't waste your time. it's just, but I think in the interview, if you show passion, if you show curiosity, if you show humility, the willingness to learn what you need to learn, if you tell stories about ways you have gone after a goal and succeeded at that goal, and that's the kind of energy and dedication that you would bring to this role, those are the sorts of things that if an employer is open, they're going to get excited about that.
Amazing, amazing. Well, thank you, Gail, so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise. I feel very empowered to go out and redefine my goals and make sure that the work I'm doing is meeting that. And I hope everyone else who has joined us feels the exact same way as well. We are going to continue our Young Professional series throughout the month of July, and I'm going to drop a link in the chat if you enjoyed this and want to join us for future events. There are registration links and more information in there. And then if this conversation also inspired you to maybe start the search for a new career, I'd love to point you towards our U Chicago alumni job board. There are plenty of exciting jobs being posted on there and added every week. And they have a really great benefit of having a foot in the door that Gail kind of touched on. So maybe you have some questions, maybe it's a field that you don't know too much. There are a lot of jobs on there that have been posted by and shared by fellow alumni of U Chicago that can have shared their information, that they can be more than happy to have you reach out to them and talk to them about the position, the company, or just kind of the work that they do. So I will share that with you as well. Thank you again for joining us all today. There will be a survey that pops up at the end of the session. Please take it to let us know any questions you have or any potential feedback for our future programming. Thank you again, Gail, and have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.